Vit hatched in a dragon world, where normal magic rejected him. Every magical element touching him became raw physical strength instead. His silver body resembled a spellcaster, yet flight required muscle. That anomaly made the newborn stronger than ordinary silver hatchlings. His unusually pure blood also produced a terrifying dragon breath. While siblings learned spells, Vit trained strength, stamina, and anti-magic. Before that, Winter Sea mistook the speaking newborn for a dragon beast. His life began inside a silver egg, carrying another world's memories. Vit opened his eyes in total darkness with no idea where he was, or why his vision glowed gold. A flood of inherited memories then appeared, showing humans, dogs, cars, buildings, and countless unfamiliar objects. Those memories did not belong to the dragon worlds surrounding him. A voice identifying itself as his father explained that the memories came from another world entirely. His father told him they were star dragons, whose nature was freedom. He also gave the hatchling the name Vit. He promised to wait somewhere among the stars. That single promise immediately gave Vit a destination before he had even seen the sky. A crack formed in the shell, while sounds from outside reached him. Beyond the egg waited an enormous dark red female dragon named Winter Sea. Her body was hundreds of meters long, yet she watched the eggs with unmistakable maternal concern. 5 eggs had been selected together. Vit's future companions began hatching before him. A gold hatchling emerged first. He immediately started eating his own shell. A red crystal hatchling named Billy tried stealing leftover shell until Winter Sea knocked him away with wind. 2 more hatchlings joined them, while Vit remained inside his shining silver egg. When his shell finally opened, Vit stepped into the light covered in silver scales. He ignored the waiting dragons long enough to eat his shell before doing anything else. Winter Sea's expression changed the moment she saw him. Instead of greeting him normally, she called him a dragon beast. The other hatchlings immediately became quiet, because that label carried a terrifying meaning in their world. Vit did not understand it, because his inherited memories contained human knowledge rather than dragon knowledge. He simply finished eating before looking at Winter Sea. He asked what a dragon beast was. The question shocked her even more than his appearance, because true dragon beasts could not speak. Winter Sea reached down to inspect him. Vit instinctively tried to escape. His tiny legs could not outrun a dragon hundreds of meters larger, so she caught him effortlessly. Vit still resisted and bit one of her scales as hard as possible. The bite hurt his own mouth, while leaving Winter Sea completely unharmed. Even embarrassed, he refused to act submissive, because his father's words about freedom remained fixed in his mind. Winter Sea asked for his name. Vit demanded proper introductions before answering. Her amusement softened the confrontation, and she finally introduced herself. Vit then gave his own name. He rejected the idea that the other hatchlings were automatically his siblings. Their gold, green, white, crystal, and silver bodies looked too different for his inexperienced mind to accept as one family. Winter Sea explained that dragons carried bloodline inheritance containing knowledge from their parents. Cephas. Most newborns therefore understood dragon society, species, language, and basic survival before hatching. Vit had received language, but most of his inheritance described his father's old human world instead. When Winter Sea asked his species, Vit proudly answered that he was a star dragon. She told him no recognized dragon species carried that name. Based on appearance alone, she considered him a silver dragon from the metallic greater dragon family. Vit compared himself with the gold hatchling. He had to admit their bodies shared the same fundamental structure. The realization hurt, because his father had spoken about star dragons with complete certainty. Still, Vit refused to abandon the promise that his father waited among the stars. Winter Sea then explained why she had initially feared he was a dragon beast. All dragons descended from the blood left behind after ancient cosmic forces shaped their world. A destructive influence remained hidden inside dragon blood. It could overwhelm a hatchling at birth. When that happened, intelligence and personality vanished, leaving only instinct and hunger. Such a creature became a dragon beast rather than a thinking dragon. Because Vit could speak and reason normally, Winter Sea knew that fate had not claimed him. She warned him that true dragon beasts might even consume eggs or newly hatched dragons without hesitation. A hatchling carrying rich dragon blood would be especially attractive prey outside the safety of a nest. The warning made Vit understand how dangerous the world beyond Winter Sea truly was. His earlier suspicion of the frightening red dragon briefly turned into an elaborate theory that she might secretly control everything. Human fantasy stories in his inherited memories made powerful red dragons sound naturally suspicious. Vit decided to behave while quietly observing her until he understood the nest better. He asked about Deidro, the dragon nest Winter Sea had mentioned only once. She praised his memory but said he was still too young to understand everything about the place. Winter Sea also admitted that the world was far larger than even she had explored. Long ago, she had tried reaching its edge. She eventually returned, after losing a fight with a black dragon. She had once planned to grow stronger and resume that journey. Instead, caring for abandoned eggs and hatchlings became more important than her old revenge. Vit noticed how warmly Winter Sea regarded the remaining eggs. He began doubting his villain theory. Before leaving the hatching area, Winter Sea offered her giant claw as transportation. The other 4 hatchlings simply flew onto it through instinctive dragon magic. Vit spread his wings and immediately crashed, face first, into the ground. The impact broke a rock without seriously injuring him, revealing unusual durability even before anyone understood why. Vit tried again by driving his wings with increasing muscular force. After an ugly struggle, he finally forced himself into the air. He landed on Winter Sea's claw. Her surprise returned because dragons were not supposed to fly through wing strength alone. Normal dragon flight relied on innate magic that automatically drew power from surrounding elements. Winter Sea scanned Vit with spiritual power and found an impossible combination. His body matched a silver dragon externally, but his muscles were abnormally strong. His magical sensitivity was almost non-existent. Silver dragons were normally exceptional magic users, especially with water affinity. If some ground-walking bloodline dominated him, his wings should never have developed properly. Vit instead possessed working wings, extraordinary strength, and almost no response to ambient magic. Winter Sea asked for a blood sample to investigate the contradiction. Vit reluctantly scratched the tip of his tail. He produced the smallest amount he could manage. After tasting the blood through spiritual power, Winter Sea became visibly stunned. Its purity exceeded her own, despite her enormous age and legendary strength. More importantly, she could not match the bloodline to any known dragon species. For a moment, even Winter Sea had to consider whether Vit's claim about star dragons might contain some truth. She asked whether his inherited memories contained images of his parents. 2 hidden memories suddenly surfaced with overwhelming clarity. Vit saw a silver-white mother so enormous that stars seemed small inside her claws. He also saw a much smaller father, covered with golden patterns resembling flowing lava. Both figures looked at him with unmistakable affection, making the newborn cry before he could stop himself. Vit told Winter Sea only the safer details about their appearances. He kept their impossible scale to himself. Winter Sea believed his mother resembled an unusual silver dragon. His father resembled a rare variant. That possibility finally gave her a workable explanation for Vit's contradictory body. Greater dragons included several major families, but unusual individuals that fit none of them were classified as variants. Vit's father might have possessed a unique physical trait that had passed directly to his son. The exact species still remained unknown. No existing records provided a proper name. Winter Sea therefore continued testing him, instead of forcing an uncertain classification. Vit guarded his tail from further blood sampling, while demanding answers about what he actually was. Those answers would soon reveal why his missing magic had become the foundation of his physical power. Winter Sea requested additional blood for analysis. Vit protected his tail, like a dragon guarding treasure. The repeated testing confirmed that his strange bloodline was not weak or diluted. When no council record matched him, the adults faced a classification problem they could not solve through established taxonomy. Their practical answer was surprisingly simple. Let Vit name the species himself. He immediately chose Star Dragon, turning his father's impossible claim into an official biological label. For Vit, that decision repaired something the earlier Silver Dragon explanation had broken. His father might have named a species that did not exist publicly, but Vit could now carry that identity openly. The deeper test results explained his body even more clearly. Vit possessed both fire and water elemental affinity, inherited from his parents. Ordinarily, that combination should have made him a promising magical dragon. Instead, a unique inherited trait devoured every bit of magical energy entering his body. His body converted it into physical growth, strength, durability, and the enormous appetite required to fuel those changes. That conversion explained why a slender newborn could break stone with his face and force himself into flight. It also explained why ambient magic seemed almost absent around him. Winter could not predict whether the devouring effect would weaken during later growth stages. It might stop during his juvenile years, adolescence, adulthood, or never. Vit disliked the uncertainty, but at least the defect finally had a useful side. It was redirecting power into a completely different system. Winter also explained that Deidro was named after a space dragon who had founded and protected the nest. The name immediately caught Vit's attention because anything connected to space felt tied to his father's promise. Deidro ranked among the world's strongest dragon nests. It had survived for more than 10,000 years. Winter carried the 5 hatchlings outside the hatching cavern. She showed them the vast canyon below. Gigantic plants filled the valley, while dragon caves covered distant cliffs like windows in a city. Strange creatures moved through the air and jungle, turning the nest into a living fantasy landscape. Instead, he saw a beautiful sanctuary protected by dragons who clearly cared about it. She warned them that the canyon was safe only by dragon standards. Even herbivorous dragon beasts could injure or consume newborn hatchlings if something provoked them. Until the 5 could use lower magic reliably, they were forbidden from wandering outside alone. The rule was less about fighting and more about surviving long enough for an adult to rescue them. Winter then transported them to Deidro Dragon Academy. The school occupied an enormous extinct volcano shaped into 9 broad floors. No stairs existed because nearly every dragon student could fly between levels. Massive stone corridors and pillars were built for bodies hundreds of meters long. Vit immediately understood how small and vulnerable the 5 newborns truly were. The school preserved bloodline knowledge that would otherwise fade as dragons aged. For hatchlings with normal inheritance, classes reinforced what they already carried instinctively. For Vit, the library would have to replace nearly everything his parents had failed to provide. Winter assigned all 5 hatchlings one enormous cave on the 6th floor. Vit immediately wanted private space. He briefly imagined forcing the others to request separation. Before any plan could begin, they had to bind themselves to the cave's protective barrier with blood. His companions casually bit their claws and completed the ritual. Vit once again used the abused tip of his tail. He contributed the smallest drop possible. Winter warned that older students adored hatchlings but could accidentally crush them through enthusiastic affection. That warning ended any immediate plan to wander the academy alone. The moment Winter left, a white hatchling named Celine declared herself leader. She had hatched first and could already produce visible light magic. Her confidence came naturally because power mattered greatly in dragon's social behavior. The green hatchling Innate introduced herself next. Her gentle voice contrasted with a body built with dangerous horns and a powerful tail. Billy followed with red crystals growing from his joints, horns, chest, and tail. He accepted Celine's leadership only as long as she did not abuse it. The gold hatchling rejected the idea completely. He demanded a fair physical fight without magic. Celine postponed that challenge. After turning her attention toward Vit, she called him the magicless runt. She questioned what he could possibly use against a magical dragon. Vit had already decided weakness would not determine his place in the cave. Vit answered the insult by charging before anyone could stop him. His first claw strikes bounced harmlessly from Celine's scales. Her attacks also produced sparks without breaking his silver armor. The fight quickly revealed that both hatchlings were too durable for simple claws to decide the winner. Celine adapted first by taking to the air. Flight gave her speed, height, and angles Vit could not match with his clumsy muscle-powered wings. Vit answered by sprinting across the ground with unexpectedly explosive leg strength. His speed shocked every hatchling watching from the side. Celine still remained faster in the air. She dove toward him with holy light around her body. Vit waited until the last possible moment. Then he stopped from full speed so suddenly that his joints and muscles screamed under the force. Celine overshot the sudden stop and flew directly past him. Vit jumped with pure leg power, rose above her flight path, and grabbed her in midair. Both dragons crashed into the floor, hard enough to throw stone and dust across the cave. The battle became a wrestling match, where aerial advantages no longer mattered. Celine discovered that Vit's raw strength exceeded hers, despite his thinner build. Vit discovered that superior strength did not automatically solve stamina. They rolled, clawed, bit, and pushed until neither had enough energy to continue. No scale had been seriously damaged, but both hatchlings were completely exhausted. Vit's private room strategy had failed before he could even defeat one roommate. Selenfer recovered first and did something Vit had not expected from a proud rival. She apologized for underestimating him. She also promised that the next fight would end differently. Because she had failed to defeat Vit, Celine refused to claim unquestioned authority over O. Her willingness to accept the result earned Vit's reluctant respect. After everyone moved away, Vit wrapped himself in his wings. He hid the pain in his legs. The abrupt stop during the fight had strained muscles throughout his body. Billy, Dynite, and O considered approaching him, but his closed posture made them leave him alone. Vit pretended that isolation was exactly what he wanted. The feeling was less convincing once the cave became quiet. Exhaustion eventually pulled him into sleep. While he slept, ambient magical energy flowed toward his body and was converted into growth. By the time he woke, much of the muscle damage had already healed. That discovery introduced Vit to one of the most unfair advantages of dragon biology. Dragons naturally grew stronger through eating, sleeping, and aging. Vit appreciated the benefit, but rejected the idea of waiting passively for centuries. His greatest weakness remained obvious. Almost every opponent could escape him simply by flying. So, he began training his wings through repetition, instead of trusting magical flight that would never activate. Celine discovered him exercising until his back muscles trembled. At first, she thought his wings were injured and tried to stop him. Vit explained that he was deliberately strengthening them. Celine insisted dragons did not train wings because sleeping already improved their bodies. Vit answered that natural growth was too slow for someone determined to reach the stars. That answer transformed Celine's competitive curiosity into genuine rivalry. She declared Vit the opponent she intended to surpass. Their conversation ended when an enormous eye appeared at the cave entrance. The eye immediately put both hatchlings on guard. The eye belonged to Winter Sea, who had arrived carrying a young booze dragon beast for their first practical lesson. The creature resembled an enormous horned bovine, covered by fur over hidden scales. Winter Sea gathered all 5 hatchlings. She explained that nutritious dragon beast meat accelerated early growth. Then she announced the uncomfortable assignment. They had to defeat the animal and eat it. None of the newborns volunteered immediately. They had been alive only a short time, and ending another creature's life felt different from sparring inside the cave. Winter Sea reminded them that Deidro could not protect them forever. Dragons survived because they learned early that food, danger, and death were parts of the same world. Celine forced herself forward first. She completed the task, despite visibly struggling with the experience. Winter Sea told her to eat and grow if she never wanted to become the helpless side of such an encounter. Oh, Billy and Dynite eventually followed. Vit approached last and managed the strike, but he reacted badly when the animal's blood touched his claws. He backed away immediately and tried, wiping himself clean against the floor. Winter Sea used a tiny flame to remove the blood without burning his scales. Vit clarified that seeing blood did not disturb him. He simply hated having it on his own body. The larger problem was food, because he had no interest in eating raw meat covered in blood. Human memories supplied an obvious alternative. Vit asked Winter Sea to cook it. She warned that many dragons considered cooked meat inferior, but she agreed to try. A wave of controlled fire roasted the carcass. It filled the cave with a smell every hatchling immediately noticed. The others stopped eating raw meat and requested the same treatment. Within minutes, Vit had accidentally introduced his entire group to cooked dragon beast meals. His own appetite became the next surprise. Most of the hatchlings stopped after consuming only part of their portions. Vit finished his entire meal, bones included. He then accepted leftovers from Celine. He ate more than the other 4 hatchlings combined. Winter Sea had already connected that appetite to his energy-devouring body. The more magical power his body converted into physical growth, the more conventional fuel it demanded. She also delivered the result of the wider bloodline investigation. No council archive recognized Vit's species, because he was clearly intelligent and biologically stable. The lack of a record no longer mattered for his right to remain in Deidro. Vit officially kept the name Star Dragon. The same Asilysus confirmed his fire affinity from one parent and water affinity from the other. Neither affinity could function normally because his body consumed magical energy before spells could use it. That missing magic was therefore the direct price of his extraordinary physical development. Winter Sea could not promise that the trade would ever reverse. Vit accepted the uncertainty, because the physical side was already producing measurable results. Before class ended, a swarm of tiny flying creatures descended on the leftover food. Winter Sea immediately ordered the hatchlings away from them. The insects were morse dragon beasts, extremely weak creatures that carried dangerous plague. Even contact with contaminated food could infect a hatchling. Wintersea trapped several inside a floating fire bubble, so the class could study them safely. Billy tried licking the bubble. He burned his tongue because magical resistance protected scales, not soft tissue. That incident became another survival lesson no one else needed to experience personally. Small dragon-shaped creatures then entered. They began hunting the morse beasts. Wintersea identified them as ball dragon beasts, harmless allies of dragons, because they consumed plague carriers. When threatened, each ball dragon absorbed wind energy. The ball dragon inflated into a tough floating sphere. Billy attempted to eat one. He ended with the inflated creature stuck inside his mouth. Wintersea had to shake him by the tail until it came loose. For the first time, all 5 hatchlings laughed together, without rivalry getting in the way. They were becoming companions, rather than obstacles blocking his private cave. Wintersea redirected them toward the day's real subject, magic. She asked what mattered most before fighting an enemy. Vit answered that getting stronger mattered, while Billy chose magic itself. Dynite supported Vit's broader answer because strength could come from more than spells. Celine gave Wintersea the answer she wanted. Understand the enemy first. Wintersea then explained why Vit still needed magical education. Magic dominated the world, even if his own body prevented conventional casting. Learning how spells worked would let him predict, evade, and eventually counter them. Vit accepted the logic, even though studying a power he could not use still frustrated him. Wintersea then revealed one exception that transformed his mood completely. Every greater dragon possessed origin magic embedded directly into its biology. Dragon Breath was one such ability. Unlike ordinary spells, it did not require Vit to gather external elements into a normal casting structure. That meant his devouring body could not erase the ability before it formed. The explanation triggered a memory of his father, fighting in the emptiness beyond worlds. Vit remembered a colossal opponent, and his father's body glowing with golden lava-like patterns. A white-hot breath then pierced the enormous enemy with incomprehensible force. Vit concealed the impossible scale of that memory. He described only the visible properties of the breath. Wintersea believed his father's attack resembled an exceptionally powerful heat-based breath. She warned that Vit might inherit a different breath from his mother's side instead. The other hatchlings immediately wanted to know what their own species could produce. O's gold dragon breath mixed fire and earth into clinging lava. Celine's holy dragon breath specialized in extreme speed and penetration. Dynite's green dragon bloodline could produce poison or nature-aligned breath. Crystal dragons like Billy possessed a weaker breath but exceptional long-term elemental storage. Billy was devastated to learn that his favorite category ranked poorly in raw breath power. Wintersea took them outside to begin the actual training. The open canyon immediately distracted the hatchlings with giant flowers and strange flying beasts. She threatened to return them to the cave if they could not focus. 5 wandering attention spans suddenly became perfectly disciplined. Breath training began with something simple enough to sound ridiculous: controlled exhalation. A hatchling that inhaled at the wrong moment could burn the unprotected inside of its own mouth. That risk was especially persuasive, because an injured mouth meant being unable to eat. Billy nearly fainted by holding his breath too long. He needed Wintersea to remind him that breathing remained necessary. Once the basic rhythm was stable, she guided them into sensing magical elements. Vit entered an inner darkness filled with tiny colored lights representing free elemental energy. Red and blue particles felt especially familiar because of his inherited fire and water affinities. For a moment, the elements drifted toward him naturally. Then his body began pulling them in. Anything that came close vanished into him. It became fuel before he could command it. The remaining particles scattered away, as if fleeing a predator. Vit returned from the vision understanding exactly why normal magic refused him. Wintersea confirmed that the devouring response was automatic and could not simply be switched off. His siblings continued interacting peacefully with the same elements that escaped him. Vit felt the difference sharply, but refused to stay trapped in disappointment. Wintersea reminded him that dragon breath came from internal structures rather than ordinary external casting. That single exception was enough to keep him moving. Wintersea next taught them how to locate the dragon crystal inside the head. Celine found hers first, followed by Dynite, Vit, and finally Billy. Vit's crystal was tiny but clearly contained both fire and water energy. She then guided them toward two special elemental chambers, positioned between their ordinary lungs. One chamber radiated overwhelming heat, while the other carried impossible cold. Vit instinctively understood that his fire energy belonged inside the hotter chamber. The moment he pushed it there, dormant origin magic structures activated automatically. His spiritual reserve emptied so quickly that the inner vision disappeared. In the physical world, Vit's jaws opened by instinct. White-hot light gathered around his mouth. It erupted before he could aim carefully. The narrow breath struck Winter Sea under the chin. Vit collapsed immediately, because one newborn attack had consumed nearly everything he possessed. Winter Sea touched the smoking scale with open disbelief. Her legendary red dragon body was extraordinarily resistant to heat. Yet, Vit's first breath had still produced noticeable warmth. She concluded that its temperature already rivaled advanced fire magic despite his age. A surprise hit of that quality could seriously injure much stronger young dragons. Winter Sea therefore made Vit promise never to aim it at Daedro dragons, unless the nest itself had been betrayed. The warning made clear that his strongest gift was also too dangerous for casual sparring. Celine took her turn next. She released an extremely fast, whitely breath. She immediately asked how it compared with Vit's attack. Winter Sea's careful silence gave Celine all the motivation she needed. Oh, followed with a sticky golden lava breath that melted stone and continued burning after impact. Billy produced a storm of fire-wrapped red crystals. The crystals looked impressive, but shattered harmlessly against Winter Sea's scales. Dynite finished with a calm green stream that seemed gentle until everything along its path lost vitality. Grass and soil turned gray where the nature breath passed. Winter Sea praised the destructive quality, leaving Vit newly cautious around the quietest member of the group. After the lesson, all 5 hatchlings were drained by their first successful breaths. For all their different talents, each one still possessed the energy reserves of a newborn. Winter Sea rewarded them with limited freedom to explore nearby. His siblings chased unfamiliar creatures and investigated oversized plants. Vit cared more about increasing the stamina that limited every useful thing his body could do. He asked Winter Sea how quickly a dragon could deliberately accelerate growth. She reminded him that the juvenile period alone lasted around a century. Adolescence added roughly 2 more centuries before a young dragon could leave the nest independently. Vit reacted badly to the thought of waiting centuries before reaching the stars. Winter Sea explained that space itself was hostile, empty, cold, and dangerous even for powerful dragons. The warning only made his father's promise feel farther away. That night, the others slept, while Vit remained awake with hunger and restless thoughts. He decided to leave the cave alone. The academy corridors were empty. The open top of the volcano showed a path toward the night sky. Vit flew upward through 2 floors before his wing stamina began failing. He barely reached the 9th floor corridor and collapsed. Vit turned and saw an enormous transparent blue-green dragon. Because his human memories supplied the concept immediately, he assumed he was looking at a ghost. The sight frightened him so completely that he fainted. Vit later woke in an enormous laboratory filled with crystal containers, strange liquids, and preserved specimens. Rows of giant eyes floated inside jars along the walls. The room became even worse when Vit discovered a preserved silver hatchling inside a large container. His old fears about secret experiments returned instantly. The transparent dragon explained that the hatchling had died from plague after being found without adult care. The stranger also recognized Vit because Winter Sea had already sent his blood for examination. Vit protected his tail immediately when she expressed scientific interest in obtaining another sample. The transparent dragon introduced himself as Borko, a wind elemental dragon and academy potion teacher. His body was not ghostly at all. Elemental dragons could shift between physical bodies and forms, made primarily from their element. Borko preferred moving as transparent wind. He also explained why Vit had collapsed. Vit's abnormal bloodline consumed energy at an extraordinary rate, especially after heavy physical exertion. That metabolism supported unusual strength, but required far more food and recovery than other hatchlings. Without immediate fuel after intense training, Vit could simply run out of usable energy. Borko produced a dead booze beast. He prepared it as a meal. Vit requested cooked meat again. Borko handled the carcass with precise potion laboratory tools. Watching the supposed ghost work like a careful chef eased some of Vit's fear. The laboratory still contained magical circles Vit did not understand. Borko joked about annihilation and pulverization arrays, until Vit no longer knew which floor markings were actually dangerous. the transparent teacher clearly enjoyed frightening nervous hatchlings. Vit eventually found a place he believed was safe enough to stand. During the meal preparation, Borko shifted briefly into a solid blue-green dragon body. The demonstration proved that elementalation was an ability rather than his permanent physical state. He also told Vit that another teacher named Kellen had been away gathering potion ingredients for decades. Dragon timescales continued, making Vit's human memories feel absurdly short. Borko warned him that the first 2 years after hatching were a crucial growth window. Proper food and sleep during that period could increase a hatchling from roughly 1 meter to several meters. Neglecting the window could permanently reduce mature size. Vit suddenly understood that sleep was not laziness for a young dragon. Borko mixed a carefully measured drop of doya flower extract into Vit's meal. The medicine would force deep sleep, without harming a hatchling at the correct dose. Before eating, Vit made Borko promise not to collect blood while he was unconscious. The request amused the teacher, but established a boundary Vit considered completely necessary. The drugged meal worked almost immediately. Vit later woke back inside his shared cave. After Borko had carried him home, he discovered that he had somehow rolled across the floor during sleep and ended beside Celine. Celine noticed the unfamiliar flower smell and demanded an explanation. Vit tried speaking quietly so the others would remain asleep. That failed when his companions woke and learned he had sneaked out. Made the more important observation. Vit was visibly larger than the previous day. His scales also felt harder. Celine's test bite hurt her teeth without affecting him. Vit connected the growth to extra food, complete exhaustion, and Borko's forced deep sleep. The result was not a magical shortcut. His body simply grew faster when its enormous energy demands were fully satisfied. Billy immediately wanted the same advantage, until Vit explained that his own metabolism created the extra requirement. The lesson still mattered to everyone, because the early growth window applied to all hatchlings. Wintersea arrived before their discussion finished, and confirmed Borko's warning. She also apologized for failing to notice Vit's unusual nutritional needs sooner. The powerful breath, constant hunger, and repeated exhaustion should have revealed the problem. Vit's opinion of Wintersea changed permanently when he realized her concern was genuine. She was not controlling him for some hidden scheme. She had simply become responsible for 5 abandoned hatchlings and took that responsibility seriously. Breakfast that morning came from an adult booze dragon beast, hundreds of meters long. Wintersea casually removed the creature from a hidden storage space inside a special reverse scale on her neck. She explained that greater dragons developed one such scale after the juvenile phase. The reverse scale contained a personal pocket dimension for storing equipment, food, and other supplies. Innate dragon beasts, created from corrupted eggs, lacked that feature. If the hatchlings someday met a suspicious dragon without a reverse scale, Wintersea advised immediate caution. Only Celine and Vit requested cooked meat, while the others returned to eating raw portions. Wintersea then consumed everything the hatchlings left behind with almost insulting ease. The size difference reminded Vit that even his enormous appetite remained tiny by adult dragon standards. His siblings expected a rest day after the previous lessons, because his bloodline inheritance contained almost no useful dragon knowledge. Wintersea scheduled a library session immediately. Celine, Billy, Denite, and O volunteered to accompany him rather than stay behind. Wintersea warned that coming along was entirely their choice. None of them understood that statement until they reached the 8th floor. The Academy Library occupied almost the entire ring of the volcano. Dusty stone shelves held metal and crystal books sized for adult dragons. A single volume could stand dozens of meters tall. It weighed more than Vit's whole body. Wintersea selected a stack covering magic, dragon species, dragon beasts, herbs, potions, magic crystal, and wilderness knowledge. Vit initially assumed the stack represented one day's reading. It was actually his curriculum for roughly the next century. Wintersea opened a massive book called Origins of Magic. She helped Vit climb onto the metal page. Ancient dragon symbols were engraved into the surface, rather than written on paper. Some of those symbols formed true dragon language spells. Wintersea demonstrated by speaking a short phrase and creating a large fireball almost instantly. Vit repeated the pronunciation perfectly. Spiritual power moved through him. Nearby fire elements started gathering. For one brief moment, it looked like normal spellcasting might actually work. Then his body consumed the incoming fire energy before the spell could form. The remaining particles dispersed, leaving Vit with another failed cast. Winter Sea reminded him that pronunciation alone was never enough. Normal spells also required properly constructed magical nodes inside the dragon crystal. She added that constant element absorption was not entirely bad. As long as his body continued converting magic into physical growth, his strength potential had no obvious conventional ceiling. Vit accepted the trade more easily when she described it that way. He continued reading the ancient creation stories recorded in the library. One account claimed the creation dragon's blood eventually produced 8 magical elements and the first dragon mother. Some claimed 8 original dragon gods hatched from separate elemental eggs. Others suggested evolution, unknown cosmic events, or visitors from beyond the stars. The star visitor theory immediately caught Vit's attention because of his father's memories. Winter Sea warned him that inherited memories could include fiction written deliberately by parents. No surviving scholar could prove any origin story completely. Vit suggested that a time traveler could simply witness the past. Winter Sea told him a known time, dragon, had once attempted something similar and vanished. No one knew whether that dragon reached another era or was simply destroyed. The answer taught Vit that even legendary abilities could carry risks beyond ordinary understanding. The library also introduced the formal dragon power hierarchy. Black iron stood at the bottom, followed by bronze, silver, gold, platinum, amethyst, legendary, mythical, and godlike. Each major rank contained lower, middle, and upper stages. Newborn greater dragons naturally began around black iron middle. Eating the birth shell usually pushed them toward the upper stage. By roughly 2 years old, ordinary greater dragons advanced to bronze through natural growth alone. Juveniles eventually reached silver simply by aging normally. Young adults commonly reached platinum. Middle-aged dragons reached amethyst, and old greater dragons could become legendary without extraordinary talent. Old age did not weaken dragons the way Vit's human memories suggested. For their species, later life often represented the peak of natural power. A normal greater dragon could live around 24,000 years. Mythical or godlike breakthroughs could extend that lifespan even further. Vit finally understood why Winter Sea treated centuries like short scheduling problems. 1 century of library work was a tiny fraction of a dragon life. Winter Sea eventually fell asleep during her own lesson. Vit had to wake her whenever he needed help turning a page heavier than himself. His siblings returned from exploring the library and tried reading beside him. Most lasted only moments before sleep defeated them too. Vit remained awake because the missing inheritance made the information more necessary for him than anyone else. At the end of the session, Winter Sea brought him a device Borko had prepared. A jar containing Doya flower extract now included a small teleportation circle on its lid. Standing on the marked spot produced 1 correctly measured dose without requiring an adult. Borko had effectively built Vit, an automatic sleep medicine dispenser. That evening, Winter Sea also brought cooked food specifically for his preference. She explained that hunting young booze beasts constantly would damage the local population. Future meals would rely more often on larger animals and controlled portions. Vit appreciated that Dedro treated even predator feeding as part of maintaining the surrounding ecosystem. After eating, he used Borko's dispenser. He prepared for another deep sleep. The library's timescale lesson changed how he viewed his father's distant promise. 24,000 years gave him room to grow without treating every day like an emergency. Vit still intended to reach the stars. He simply began accepting that the journey did not have to start immediately. The next lesson moved to a 4th-floor practice cave, filled with reinforced target dummies. Before Winter Sea finished preparing class, the hatchlings began testing their claws against the equipment. Vit scratched 1 target and left only light marks. O casually carved deep grooves through the same material. Winter Sea caught them and explained that the dummies resisted spells better than direct claws. O's physical result therefore proved much less than he hoped. Billy was once again caught trying to chew classroom equipment. Selin enjoyed being the only hatchling not receiving a lecture. When class officially began, Winter Sea asked them to explain how dragon breath activated. Selin answered that internal elements moved from the dragon crystal into the elemental lungs. Winter Sea confirmed the process, but asked why that movement produced an attack automatically. Vit connected the answer to what he had read. The elemental lungs already contained naturally formed breath nodes, waiting to be activated. Internal elements awakened those nodes, which then built the origin magic structure without conscious construction. That was why greater dragons could use breath before understanding ordinary spells. Winter Sea called the category origin magic. Such abilities were built into a species itself and could not simply be learned by outsiders. Greater dragons possessed both dragon breath and magical flight as origin magic. Ball dragons had their inflation ability through the same principle. Some innate dragon beasts retained origin magic from the dragon bloodline that created them. Without intelligence, however, those beasts could never use dragon language spellcraft. The distinction finally separated instinctive biological magic from learned magic in Vit's mind. It also explained why his body could use breath, while still destroying every attempt at ordinary spellcasting. Winter Sea then introduced a hidden factor that explained why dragon abilities did not scale neatly with elemental affinity. Dragon scholars called it blood concentration. No one could point to a single organ containing it, yet the value influenced breath, physical potential, and magical power. Winter Sea compared the 5 hatchlings by elemental sensitivity first. Selene ranked highest, followed by Knight Billy, and finally Vit. If affinity alone decided breath power, Vit should have been the weakest. His first attack had already proven the opposite. Winter Sea explained that Vit's blood concentration exceeded 90%. The others remained around the 80s, while most greater dragons were lower still. Even Winter Sea, despite 8,000 years of growth and legendary rank, had less concentrated blood than Vit. Some scholars believed extraordinary variants represented ancient blood reversions toward primordial dragon ancestors. Billy became unhappy with his own ranking, until Winter Sea reminded him that his concentration was still above average. Then Winter Sea gave Vit the most important promise of the lesson. His inability to use elemental magic did not have to last forever. At legendary rank, dragons stopped relying only on ordinary elements. They began touching deeper rules of reality. Those laws were not limited by the same external elemental behavior that Vit's body kept consuming. If he survived long enough to reach legendary power, conventional elemental rejection might stop mattering. His extraordinary blood concentration could then make rule-based magic especially dangerous. Vit finally understood that his path did not require fixing his body. He could simply become strong enough to move beyond the stage where the defect controlled his options. Winter Sea also hinted that physical strength itself could eventually reach legendary quality. For Vit, that possibility mattered even more than future spellcasting. His body had already chosen strength as its primary destination. Legendary power simply gave him a finish line, far beyond the classroom. Legendary rank was still unimaginably far away for a newborn. For now, he needed to learn ordinary magic theory, even if he could not release the spells. She explained that a spell depended on blood concentration, raw power, stored elements, and technical mastery. Technical mastery could be trained immediately. Ancient dragon language defined where magical nodes should appear inside a casting structure. Spiritual power acted like the writing tool, while internal elemental energy supplied the marks. Connecting properly placed nodes created a circuit that attracted additional power from the environment. Vit could complete every step except the final gathering of free elements. That meant he could still practice building the spell framework. A correct fireball and an incorrect fireball both produced nothing when Vit tried to cast them. Winter Sea solved that problem with a technique almost nobody else respected. She cast a slow fireball beside him. She invited Vit to interfere using spiritual power. If his own node placement matched hers accurately, he could disturb the corresponding part of her spell. Vit immediately understood the larger possibility. He was learning how to break them before someone else finished casting. Winter Sea called the method spiritual magic. She had invented it as an experiment years earlier, but ordinary dragons preferred overpowering hostile spells with stronger spells. For a dragon unable to cast normally, the neglected technique suddenly became extremely valuable. Vit targeted Winter Sea's first fireball node repeatedly. Eventually, the fireball visibly wobbled. Vit had found his first correct node. By the end of the long practice session, he could disrupt 2 of the 4 simple fireball nodes. Winter Sea had expected him to need several lessons just to interfere with one. The progress excited Vit more than a failed attempt at conventional magic ever had. His siblings spent the same day trying to create their first full spells. That failure reminded Vit that normal magic was not effortless merely because elements cooperated. Winter Sea then clarified the limits of spell disruption. If an opponent's spiritual power massively exceeded Vit's, his interference could proceed. Breaking one point inside a 30-node technique might not matter. Vit would eventually need stronger spiritual power, deeper spell knowledge, and the ability to disrupt several nodes almost simultaneously. The path was difficult precisely because no ordinary dragon bothered specializing in it. That made Vit like it even more. His weakness had created a reason to master something everyone else ignored. Winter Sea ordered the class to stop before exhaustion damaged their growth. His siblings wanted to continue because none had completed a successful spell. She solved that temptation by sleeping inside their cave that night. Vit used his Doya flower dose. He slept deeply beside a dragon, large enough to fill much of the room. The next morning, Winter Sea offered another library trip. His siblings refused, with impressive speed. They preferred failing at magic practice to facing another day of building-sized books. He kept imagining Celine, O, Dinette, and Billy practicing while he read theories about abilities he could not cast. Winter Sea noticed the frustration and changed the reading plan. Instead of another dense magic history chapter, she opened the Dragon Encyclopedia. She wanted Vit to understand the species around him before unfamiliar dragons frightened or confused him again. The book cataloged hundreds of recognized dragon species. Greater dragons had the longest lives, strongest average magic, highest blood concentration, and largest bodies. Ground-walking dragons sacrificed flight and most magic for exceptional physical power. Flying dragons were smaller and shorter-lived, but unusually agile and inventive with magic. Deidro Academy housed only greater dragons. Vit would need to travel outside the nest to meet the other major types. Winter Sea mentioned the 10,000 Dragon Feast, a vast gathering held only once every 4,000 years. The previous gathering had happened about 2 centuries earlier. Vit realized he would wait roughly 38 centuries for the next one. Winter Sea pointed out that by then, he would actually be old enough to attend freely. Dragon timescales once again turned an impossible wait into a future appointment. The Greater Dragon section divided the family into metallic, chromatic, crystal, elemental, and miscellaneous groups. Vit officially belonged in the miscellaneous category because no established species matched the star dragon. Winter Sea started with metallic dragons because O was gold and Vit's mother resembled silver. Gold dragons were famous for pride, physical confidence, and a love of sunbathing. Winter Sea suggested that O's silence might come from pride rather than dislike. Vit realized Billy had been the one repeatedly dragging O into group activities. The observation made him wonder whether he had mistaken shyness for arrogance. However, the picture lacked the subtle rainbow shimmer Vit remembered on his mother's scales. That difference suggested she might also have been an unusual variant rather than a normal silver dragon. Vit kept the observation private because it did not change his chosen identity. The chromatic section covered black, blue, green, red, and white dragons. A general note about their tempers made Winter Sea suspiciously eager to turn pages. Vit noticed the reaction, but wisely avoided testing her patience. Crystal dragons explained Billy's glowing body structures. Their crystals stored elemental energy. Fuller reserves made the formation shine more brightly. Although their breath was weaker, crystal dragons excelled at sustained combat because their bodies held unusually large stores. The description also confirmed that an attraction to shiny objects was common among their kind. Billy's habits suddenly looked less random and more biological. Vit then reached the miscellaneous section containing holy dragons, frost dragons, and other rare variants. He struggled repeatedly to distinguish very similar portraits. After several attempts, she realized the pattern was too consistent to ignore. Winter Sea stopped the library lesson. She took Vit directly back to Borko's laboratory for a proper examination. Borko prepared several portrait plates. He asked Vit to identify the dragons shown. One silver portrait looked so familiar that Vit confidently identified it as himself. It was actually a stranger. A green portrait looked exactly like Dinite to him. That dragon was also someone he had never met. Borko concluded that Vit had a rare form of face blindness, affecting recognition within the same dragon species. Vit could distinguish a gold dragon from a green dragon without difficulty. He could not reliably distinguish 2 similarly sized gold dragons from each other by appearance alone. Winter Sea worried that the diagnosis would deepen Vit's frustration about being different. Vit surprised her by reacting calmly. Compared with missing normal magic, broken inheritance, abnormal appetite, and muscle-powered flight, one more inconvenience felt manageable. He even joked that anyone wanting instant recognition could simply become a completely different color. She pointed out one practical advantage. Celine was currently the only holy dragon in the entire academy, so Vit would always recognize at least one roommate immediately. the problem would become more serious as he met larger groups containing repeated species. Vid accepted that future complication without letting it change his goals. Winter Sea left him at the shared cave while she helped Borko inventory potion supplies. Vit expected to find his companions practicing magic. Instead, Ceceline and O were finally completing the physical duel they had postponed since the first day. Both dragons fought in the air, trading dives, claws, and sudden changes of direction. Celine's larger body and better magical control gradually pushed O backward. Billy and Dynite watched from the side like spectators. Vit accidentally blasted them with dust when landing. He then learned why the fight had started. An entire morning of failed spellcasting had frustrated O enough to demand a different kind of competition. Billy asked what happened at the library. Vit explained the face blindness. He used Dynite as a hypothetical example. If another green dragon matched her size, Vit might see both individuals as effectively identical. Billy decided the condition did not sound especially serious. He also suggested Wintersea paid unusual attention to Vit. Still, the private library trips, medical concern, and extra monitoring were difficult to ignore completely. Their discussion ended when Celine seized O's tail. She slammed him into the cave floor. O rose painfully, but accepted the loss without making excuses. His gold dragon pride allowed another challenge later, not denial of the result. Celine immediately turned toward Vit and asked for a rematch. Vit noticed she was exhausted from fighting O and refused to take advantage. He wanted to beat his rival at full strength, rather than collect a meaningless victory. The answer earned another degree of Celine's respect. Vit then reminded everyone that they were supposed to be practicing magic. 4 exhausted hatchlings reacted. As though he had personally ruined their day, they nevertheless returned to their exercises. Celine, O, Dynite, and Billy continued struggling to create their first complete spells. Vit returned to wing training because spiritual magic practice required Winter Sea's controlled casting. By evening, everyone was too tired for another secret practice session. Vit prepared to take his sleep medicine. Billy blocked the dispenser with a dangerous expression of excitement. He proposed sneaking outside the academy that night. Vit started refusing until Billy mentioned the stars. Vit agreed on strict conditions. Billy would follow his lead, remain quiet, and avoid unnecessary exploration. The pair tried leaving on foot to reduce noise. Before reaching the exit, they discovered Celine, Dynite, and O already awake and watching them. The excluded hatchlings demanded to join. A secret 2-dragon trip became a 5-dragon escape before Vit could stop it. Their improved bodies made the climb through the volcano easier than Vit's first attempt. All 5 reached the rim. They finally saw the unobstructed night sky. Millions of stars filled the darkness above Dedro. For Vit, the sight mattered more than simple beauty. Somewhere beyond that sky waited the father, who had named him and promised another meeting. He silently renewed the goal that had survived every strange discovery since hatching. Celine noticed how focused he had become. She quietly led the others away. The gesture gave Vit space without forcing him to explain emotions he did not want to discuss. Nearby, his companions talked about magic practice and their uncertain future. Their growing fatigue eventually became obvious. Vit decided they needed to return. Before anyone fell asleep on the crater, he counted the group and found 1 dragon missing. Everyone immediately understood why that was dangerous. Billy's curiosity had already produced several accidents inside the academy. Now he was somewhere beyond the crater, without adult protection. They began searching until Celine spotted him, returning from the outer slope. Billy carried a dead creature, roughly half a meter long, like a prize. It resembled a wasp with draconic jaws, sharp legs, wings, and an empty opening, where a stinger should have been. None of the hatchlings recognized the species. Vit had studied dragon classifications that day, not the Dragon Beast Encyclopedia. They knew remaining outside to investigate was a worse idea than taking the object home. Vit created a simple cover story. If Winter Sea discovered the creature, they would claim it had somehow entered the cave, like smaller pests sometimes did. Even Celine accepted the plan, because getting caught outside at night promised serious punishment. The 5 returned to their cave and fell asleep almost immediately. By morning, the dead creature sat in the center of the floor like evidence waiting for an investigator. Heavy footsteps announced Winter Sea's arrival. Every hatchling tried to look innocent before she even entered. Winter Sea started with breakfast and then noticed the corpse. Legendary pressure spread through the cave strongly enough to flatten the hatchling's scales and shake the floor. This was not ordinary irritation about broken rules. Winter Sea recognized the dead creature as a genuine threat. She asked where it had come from. 4 pairs of eyes immediately shifted toward Billy. The carefully rehearsed cover story disappeared the moment he faced Winter Sea directly. Billy confessed the stargazing trip, his solo exploration, and exactly where he found the body. Winter Sea did not waste time yelling. She dropped their food, ordered everyone to stay inside, and left immediately. Moments later, dragon roars echoed through the volcano from outside. One roar became dozens as adult dragons answered one another across the canyon. Vit understood that their midnight discovery had triggered something far larger than punishment. He flew toward the crater despite Winter Sea's order, and the other 4 followed. From the top of the academy, they saw Devours mobilizing for war. Hundreds of adult dragons filled the sky in organized formations. Winter Sea had expanded beyond her normal size, becoming a red giant more than 1,000 meters long. A massive brass dragon named Elbert relayed commands, while defense groups spread around the canyon. The adults were preparing to stop an incoming swarm. Before it could reach the hatchlings, Borko materialized behind the hatchlings at the crater. He immediately ordered them back inside. When Billy showed him the dead insect, the wind dragon's expression became alarmed. He wrapped all 5 hatchlings in wind energy. He sent them directly to their cave. Only then did Borko explain what Billy had found. The creature was an Abe dragon beast, a wasp-like predator specialized in hunting newborn dragons. Individual adults measured roughly 0.5 meter to 2 meters, but they attacked in enormous swarms. Their preferred prey made them infamous as hatchling killers. Once a scout detected young dragons, its body released a chemical signal capable of summoning the wider nests across great distances. Billy had discovered the warning before anyone in Devours knew an attack was approaching. Borko remained in the cave because protecting hatchlings was his assigned wartime role. A dark cloud of roughly 1 to 2 million Abe beasts advanced from the ISU plains. Brass Dragon Elbert coordinated Devours' defenses from the sky. The first defensive layer transformed border terrain into a toxic swamp designed to slow the swarm. Large area ice spells followed, striking the disorganized insects and driving many into the poisoned ground. The swarm still kept coming because losing thousands meant little to an army measured in millions. When the first barriers weakened, Elbert ordered mass dragon breath. Hundreds of adult dragons released elemental attacks together across the sky. Winter Sea finally joined the direct assault at legendary power. Her enormous lava breath swept across the formation. It cleared a vast opening through the swarm. The pause gave other defenders time to replace exhausted spells with gravity fields and earth attacks. Elbert called out that Winter Sea had grown stronger. He challenged her to fight after the crisis. Winter Sea dismissed the suggestion because she had 5 newborns to protect. When Elbert learned that 5 hatchlings had recently joined the nest, he announced it across the defense line. Yet, hundreds of strangers were risking themselves because the lives of a few newborn dragons mattered to Devours. That realization changed what the net said to him. Borko continued examining the scout while explaining Abe biology. Their nests ranged from several 100,000 insects to swarms above 10 million. They matured from egg to adult in only a few days. A single surviving queen inside Devours could destroy the local ecosystem. That queen could force the entire nest to relocate. Vit asked how Billy's scout died before the group found it. Borko revealed an unexpected answer. Ball dragons were natural predators of Abe beasts. The harmless inflatable creatures specifically consumed their stingers. They could detect the same chemical signals. A small group of ball dragons had probably killed the scout before it reached the academy. Their numbers were far too low to stop a whole swarm. But their attack had bought Devours precious warning time. Vit immediately reconsidered every joke he had made about the tiny creatures. Borko also explained why the swarm had probably appeared only recently. Devours had occupied the region for more than 10,000 years. It knew the surrounding ecosystems extremely well. No established Abe nest should have been close enough to attack from the ISU plains. The invading swarm was likely a newcomer that had expanded into unfamiliar territory. Borko told them more about Elbert, while the battle continued overhead. The Brass Dragon was one of Devours' 5 legendary peak defenders. He oversaw perimeter security, military response, and wilderness teams that searched for abandoned eggs. Some hatchlings at the academy might have survived, only because his patrols found them in time. After the juvenile phase, Elbert would also oversee much of their long adolescent training. Vit learned that young adults could later choose independent lives rather than remaining permanent nest guards. That future freedom mattered because he still intended to explore the wider world. Borko stayed with the five throughout the crisis, watching them train rather than joining the already overwhelming adult force. Celino Dynite and Billy practiced spell formation. Vit continued strengthening his wings. When Winter Sea returned, every hatchling suddenly doubled the intensity of training, in an obvious attempt to look obedient. Borko told her they had behaved well. For several seconds, the five silently regarded him as the greatest teacher in Dadro. Winter Sea's expression then revealed that she already knew they had climbed to the crater after being ordered inside. She asked who had started the original Midnight Expedition. Billy stepped forward and tried accepting all responsibility. Vit, Celine, Denite, and O immediately interrupted him with their own confessions. The chaotic honesty surprised Winter Sea more than the original rule-breaking. She finally explained that their mistake had accidentally protected the nest. Finding the scout early allowed Deidro to mobilize before the swarm reached the canyon. Without that warning, eggs and hatchlings might have been attacked before defenders formed proper lines. Winter Sea therefore promised them a future reward after the juvenile phase. The reward did not erase the rule violation. All five were sentenced to spend an entire day in the library. For Vit, who already visited regularly, the punishment sounded less frightening than it did to the others. His siblings still failed to complete their first ordinary spells. Vit located another fireball node through disruption practice. He moved closer to mastering the simple pattern. That night, exhaustion finally silenced the cave. Vit stood beside his Doya dispenser and considered taking the medicine. He skipped the dose and flew to the crater alone. After only a short look at the night sky, Vit forced himself to turn back. A scraping sound on the outer volcano slope stopped him. Below, a small gold dragon was moving toward the forest. Because of his face blindness, Vit immediately assumed the dragon was O. O was supposed to be asleep in the cave. Vit had no time to return and verify before the figure disappeared into the trees. Flying downhill consumed little stamina, but the gold dragon vanished near the forest edge. A poorly aimed lava breath suddenly erupted from the darkness and missed Vit. The unfamiliar gold dragon stepped into view with a defensive posture. Her expression carried no recognition. That detail finally told Vit the truth. It was the first time his face blindness had created immediate physical danger. Vit demanded to know who she was and why she had attacked. The stranger's voice revealed that she was female, making the resemblance to O even more disorienting. She refused a proper introduction, said she would remember Vit, and disappeared into the forest. Vit nearly started a fire by scratching his own metal scales while thinking. He then faced the far harder problem of flying all the way back up the enormous volcano. By the time he reached the cave, exhaustion erased the final part of his return from memory. Winter Sea woke him the next morning. She immediately asked whether he had gone outside again. Vit denied everything until she pointed out fresh green leaves trapped between the scales of his tail. With physical evidence attached to him, he surrendered and described the encounter. Winter Sea recognized the likely stranger as a gold hatchling named Issa. Unlike Vit's group, Issa apparently lived within Deidro, under private care, rather than attending the academy. That explanation led to a more painful truth about the five roommates. They were not simply students selected at random. Each had been found as an abandoned egg in the wilderness. Each egg was brought to Deidro by rescue teams. Many hatchlings born inside the nest remained with their parents instead of attending Winter Sea's academy immediately. The cave went quiet as all five realized that their original parents had left them behind. Winter Sea refused to let the sadness define them. She reminded the hatchlings that they had her, Deidro, and one another now. Then, she announced that punishment for sneaking out had not disappeared. Winter Sea's chosen punishment was worse than another lecture. Every hatchling had to copy the Dragon Beast Encyclopedia by claw onto metal pages. Vit received double the work because he had repeated the nighttime escape after the first warning. Their own claws had to scratch every symbol into sheets of metal, strong enough to survive dragon handling. The first copying session left all five hatchlings with swollen, aching claws and very little patience. Their claws healed completely and returned slightly sharper than before. Repeated strain, proper food, and dragon recovery were strengthening the exact body parts used during punishment. Winter Sea had quietly turned discipline into physical conditioning. When the hatchlings asked whether that result had been intentional, she answered with a knowing smile. Instead of explaining, they complained just as loudly during the next session. But now they understood the pain was producing useful adaptation. Vit benefited especially because his body already converted absorbed magical energy into physical improvement. Every damaged claw, tired wing, and strained muscle became another target for recovery during sleep. His schedule settled into a demanding rhythm of eating, wing training, magic theory, spiritual disruption, reading, and forced rest. Unlike his companions, Vit also needed a second large meal to keep his accelerated metabolism from emptying his reserves. Borko's Doya dispenser became part of that routine whenever natural sleep did not arrive quickly enough. Selin, Dinite, and Billy continued attacking their first ordinary spells with stubborn persistence. The breakthrough finally came during the fourth formal magic class. Celine completed a light arrow spell before anyone else. The gold dragon completed a fireball soon afterward, rather than tolerate being left behind. Dinite and Billy reached their own first successful casts during the following lessons. Vit could not release any of those spells, but his training had progressed through a different measurement. He had already mapped all 4 basic fireball nodes by repeatedly disturbing Winter Sea's controlled casting. That knowledge let him recognize where the spell could be broken, even though his own fireball would never appear. Winter Sea treated the progress seriously because spiritual disruption required precision the others were not practicing. Billy learned to manage the large reserves stored in his crystal structures without wasting energy. Vit continued collecting node patterns and strengthening the spiritual precisions needed to interfere with them. He also kept training flight physically every day. The contrast between his wings and everyone else's became increasingly obvious. His companions relied on origin magic to remain airborne with relatively little muscular effort. Vit's wing muscles had to produce every bit of lift themselves. Each session therefore exhausted him faster, but strengthened the back, shoulders, and wings, supporting his unusual flight style. Winter Sea gradually stopped treating his enormous portions as surprising. She simply brought enough to keep his growth stable. Cooked meat remained Vit's preference, even after the others became comfortable returning to raw meals. The group also grew more comfortable together, as rivalry stopped meaning hostility. Yet the 5 increasingly trained, ate, rested, and got punished as one unit. Vit no longer thought seriously about forcing anyone out of the cave. The companions he once viewed as unwanted roommates had become the closest thing he possessed to sit. Winter Sea filled the parental role none of their original families had chosen to keep. Her methods were severe because dragon childhood happened inside a world where predators could attack the nest by the million. At the same time, she noticed exhaustion, brought food, arranged medical help, protected their education. She stood between them and dangers they could not understand yet. Deidro had earned trust through repeated evidence rather than promises. His laboratory remained disturbing, but the Wind Dragon had fed Vit, protected the group during war. He concealed their disobedience when punishment was unnecessary, and Billy still treated unfamiliar objects as possible food. Against that background, Vit's own abnormalities gradually felt less like a disaster. His body consumed energy at an unreasonable rate. His flight technique violated normal dragon biology, but every one of those limitations had already produced a corresponding adaptation. Missing magic pushed him towards spiritual disruption. Muscle-powered flight created stronger wings. Abnormal metabolism accelerated growth when properly fueled. Unknown blood carried extraordinary concentration. Face blindness forced him to rely more carefully on behavior, voice, species, size, and context. Even the false-sounding Star Dragon identity became real because Vit chose to make it real. Months passed without a single dramatic revelation, replacing those fundamentals. The important changes came through accumulation. Vit's claws grew harder from repeated use. His wings carried him farther before exhaustion. His muscles became denser whenever sleep converted, gathered energy into physical growth. His spiritual power became more precise around known spell nodes. His breath remained dangerous enough that Winter Sea restricted where he practiced it. His appetite kept pace with every increase. The companions also changed physically as their own natural growth accelerated. Their once tiny bodies filled more of the enormous shared cave. Flight became easier, and the Academy's oversized corridors seemed slightly less impossible. The hatchlings started sleeping longer than before. They also woke noticeably hungrier after every longer sleep. Winter Sea recognized both changes as signs that the crucial early growth period was intensifying. Practice time slowly shortened because their bodies demanded more recovery. Meals became larger because that recovery needed fuel. The encyclopedia punishment faded from daily enforcement, as even Winter C stopped prioritizing unfinished copying over healthy growth. Half-completed metal pages remained behind, as evidence of the discipline that had strengthened their claws. Vit did not complain when training schedules became less aggressive. Borko had taught him that early development could not be recovered later if he sacrificed it for impatience now. Reaching the stars required a body capable of surviving the journey, not merely a hatchling willing to ignore exhaustion. That lesson represented real growth in Vit's thinking. He still trained harder than an ordinary dragon because his path depended on physical development, but he learned to treat food and sleep as deliberate parts of training rather than interruptions. Celine noticed the change and stopped warning him about every exhausted wing session. Their rivalry became less about proving who was superior on a given day and more about watching who developed faster over time. O grew less distant as the group repeatedly included him, without waiting for pride to make the first move. Billy remained impossible to predict, but his willingness to accept blame during the Abbey incident changed how everyone trusted him. Dynite continued being the quiet, stabilizing presence whenever the others competed too aggressively. The five were still extremely young by Dragon's standards. Their power rank remained at the beginning of a lifespan, measured in tens of thousands of years. Yet the foundations being built now would determine how large, strong, and capable they became later. Vit understood that better than he had on the night he first tried escaping toward the stars. His father remained the distant destination. Dedro had become the place where he was actually learning how to reach that destination. Roughly a year after hatching, the next phase of growth arrived without warning. Vit suddenly felt heavy and unusually warm. Energy seemed to wrap around his entire body, rather than flowing through individual muscles. The sensation was not painful. It felt more like sinking beneath an impossibly comfortable blanket, while every instinct told him to stop resisting sleep. His vision gradually darkened as the cocoon sealed around him. The last thing Vit understood was that the change felt natural rather than dangerous. Then he lost awareness completely. The same transformation reached Selin, O, Dynite, and Billy. Each hatchling became enclosed inside a luminous cocoon formed from concentrated elemental energy. 5 glowing forms replaced the active young dragons inside their shared cave. Winter Sea recognized the stage immediately when she came to check on them. Instead of waking anyone, she left the cocoons undisturbed. She allowed natural growth to continue. The cocoon sleep erased Vit's awareness so completely that an entire year passed without dreams, hunger, or any sense of waiting. Inside the sealed energy shell, his abnormal body kept growing, while natural dragon development worked without conscious effort. Celine's cocoon opened first when the long transformation finally ended. She emerged confused, stretched her wings, and immediately noticed that the cave looked different from her new height. Her body now measured roughly 5 meters from head to tail. The once tiny holy dragon had gained thicker scales, stronger limbs, and claws capable of marking the academy's protected floor. Compared with the newborn who had once fought Vit over cave leadership, Celine now looked like a completely different class of creature. Winter Sea arrived with food before the newly awakened dragon could process everything. After fasting throughout the year-long cocoon stage, Celine attacked the meal with desperate hunger. Between bites, she asked whether her new size was normal for a dragon her age. Winter Sea answered that Celine was actually larger than average. The reassurance immediately restored the holy dragon's confidence. For a moment, Celine could believe her growth had placed her safely ahead of ordinary hatchlings. Then another cocoon began cracking behind her. Silver light spilled through the opening as Vit finally awakened from the same year-long transformation. His wings unfolded first, extending farther than Celine expected from the dragon she remembered. Then Vit stepped completely free. His emergence revealed how much the cocoon had changed him. His growth exceeded even Celine's already above-average development by a clearly visible margin. The difference matched everything Borko and Winter Sea had learned about his abnormal metabolism. Vit's body consumed magical energy and demanded extraordinary food. His body converted recovery into physical development more aggressively than normal dragons. A full year of uninterrupted cocoon sleep had given that process its greatest opportunity yet. The magicless star dragon had entered the transformation, relying on muscles other dragons barely needed for flight. He emerged larger, harder, and physically more developed, without gaining ordinary elemental spellcasting. At barely 2 years old, Vit had already turned his greatest magical defect into undeniable physical growth. When he stood beside Celine after the cocoon, His oversized silver body was the clearest proof that pure strength had become his real path.